The wind pushed across the open fields in sharp bursts that carried the sound of hurried footsteps, shouts, and the harsh scrape of hooves against packed dirt. People rushed out from the wooden buildings scattered around the ranch, some shielding their eyes from the dust rising in the air. They were all staring at the same spot near the corral, where a wild horse tossed its head again and again, striking the boards with such force that the rails trembled. No one dared to get close. The animal was powerful and worked up, its eyes showing fear more than anger, though most people there could not see the difference. They backed away, worried it might break loose. What none of them expected was that the only one willing to step forward was a child barely tall enough to see over the bottom rail. The child's small boots dragged through the dirt, the steps slow and unsure but stubborn. Some adults shouted for the child to move back, but the words didn't land. It was as if something had called the child forward, something strong enough to push aside fear. The wild horse slammed its hooves down and snorted hard, sending dust flying. The sound echoed off the barn walls and carried across the ranch yard, but the child kept walking toward the corral with both hands lifted gently in the air. No rope. No stick, no fear. Only a kind of quiet understanding that made everyone watching forget their breath. People whispered to each other, unable to understand why a child would put themselves in danger, or why the horse suddenly stopped tossing its head the moment those small hands reached the gate. The ranch had not seen a moment like this in a long time. Earlier that morning, the wild horse had been brought in from a roundup farther west. Folks said it was too unpredictable, too high-strung to be part of any herd. It had already injured 2 experienced handlers, and the ranch owner was exhausted from trying to calm it. Some thought it might never settle. They could see the tension in the horse's body, the tremble of its sides as if it were ready to bolt again. But suddenly the animal went still, its ears flicking forward as the child reached the gate, fingers curling around the rough wood. The onlookers froze, waiting for a kick, a charge, anything that would snap the fragile moment apart. Every ranch hand knew the horse had a history. Word traveled fast, especially about a creature that's strong and that's scared. They said it had been living on the edges of the plains alone after its herd scattered. They said it had been chased by predators, forced into narrow canyons, caught in storms with no shelter. All that fear had settled into its bones. People believed the animal simply did not trust anyone. But now it stared at the child as if it recognized something it had not seen in a long time. The child took another small step, and the horse shifted its weight. A few ranch hands reached for ropes, prepared to run in if anything went wrong, but someone held out an arm to stop them. There was a strange feeling spreading across the yard, something quiet and hopeful, something that made them stand still even when their instincts told them to interfere. The child whispered something too soft for anyone else to hear, and that whisper seemed to break through the rising tension. Dust drifted between them like a thin veil while the crowd leaned forward, trying to understand what they were seeing. The horse's breath slowed. Its muscles loosened just a little, enough to show it was listening. The child stretched out an open hand through the space in the rail, palm up, waiting without pushing, without trying to catch or force anything. It was a small gesture, but it carried more comfort than anything the adults had tried all day. People exchanged uneasy glances, wondering if something remarkable was unfolding or if disaster was about to strike. The ranch had never been a quiet place, but for a moment everything stilled. Even the chickens scratching near the barn steps stopped making noise. The wind softened. The horse lowered its head by inches, like it was measuring every movement. The child shifted closer and spoke again in that same soft voice. The horse blinked once, twice, then took a shaky step toward the gate. No one moved. No one dared to breathe heavy. The ranch hands watched with wide eyes, their ropes now useless. The owner stood with a hand on the fence, not sure whether to be relieved or terrified. All he could think was that this moment felt important, as if something long forgotten was coming back to life. People around the ranch had always said animals could sense the truth in someone's heart. Whether or not that was real, no one could deny that the child had a calmness that reached the horse in a way grown adults could not. The child had been around animals since learning to walk, helping with chores, carrying small buckets of feed, and brushing the older horses whenever allowed. The child understood patience more naturally than most people. That patience was now the only reason the horse had not exploded into another frenzy. Still, understanding did not guarantee safety. This was a wild animal, and one wrong sound or sudden movement could snap the fragile connection holding the moment together. The horse took another step, but its eyes darted toward the crowd. The tension rushed back like a shock of cold. A ranch hand shifted their boots, and the scrape of metal against stone made the horse jerk its head up. The child steadied their breath, lowering their hand again. The horse snorted and pawed at the ground, torn between fear and something it could not place. The child didn't back away. Instead, they held the gate with a little more firmness, grounding themselves as if trying to show the horse that nothing outside the corral mattered, only the space between them. The ranch owner moved closer, not wanting to scare the horse but unable to stay still any longer. He had been raising horses his entire life, and he knew what he was seeing was rare. The horse's ears weren't pinned back anymore. Its breathing wasn't as fast. It was still tense, still afraid, but there was a spark of something different. Something like trust trying to take root. A moment like that could change the direction of the horse's life if handled right. The owner saw it clearly, yet he also knew how fast it could all fall apart. The wind shifted again, lifting the child's hair slightly. The horse watched it, almost puzzled by how gently it moved. Then it leaned forward until its nose nearly touched the child's hand. A few gasps rose from the crowd. The child didn't flinch. Instead, they let out a soft breath that seemed to settle the moment even further. The horse hesitated, then lowered its head just a bit more. The child reached up and lightly brushed the bridge of its nose with their fingertips. The crowd tensed, unsure whether to cheer or brace for impact. The horse let out a low sound, almost like a sigh. The child smiled, but only for a second before tightening their grip on the rail. The horse suddenly shifted its weight again, making the boards creak under its hooves. The crowd stepped back quickly. A shock of fear flashed across the child's face, but they did not run. Instead, they spoke again in that same steady tone, and the horse slowly settled once more. It was clear this moment was hanging by the thinnest thread. What no one could see was the deeper story behind the horse's fear, a story only the animal carried. And no one could understand yet why the child seemed to be the only person it listened to. Something connected them, something that had not been explained yet, something that would later bring tears to everyone who witnessed what happened next. But for now, all eyes stayed fixed on that fragile moment as the horse lifted its head, staring into the child's eyes with a silent message. The sky dimmed as clouds rolled in, the air tightening with the sense that something important was about to happen, something that would change the ranch, the horse, and the child's life in ways none of them could yet imagine. Then the horse took a sudden step forward, pressing its weight against the gate hard enough to make the hinges moan. The crowd gasped and stumbled back. The child held firm, face pale, eyes wide, heart racing, stuck between danger and something far greater that was just beginning to reveal itself. The hinges groaned again as the wild horse pressed its weight harder into the gate, forcing the wood to bend. The ranch hands rushed forward instinctively, but the ranch owner barked at them to stop. He didn't shout out of anger. His voice carried the fear that if anyone startled the horse, everything would fall apart. The child stayed frozen, one hand still on the rail, the other hovering near the horse's trembling face. The yard felt tight with worry, but there was something else swirling in the air too, something most of them couldn't name yet. The horse wasn't acting out of rage. Its eyes were searching, trying to anchor itself to something steady, and the only steady thing in that moment was the child. The child swallowed hard, trying to remember the quiet lessons learned from years on the ranch. Patience, stillness, respect, those were the things taught by watching older ranch hands, by brushing calm horses in warm barns, by sitting near the fields with the breeze brushing through tall grass. But this horse was nothing like the trained ones. It held storms inside it. Anyone could see that. The horse had been taken in during a roundup that had gone wrong. Rumors traveled fast once it arrived. Some said its herd had been chased off by hunters. Others claimed it had lost its mother early and learned to survive on its own. It was a young horse, but its eyes carried a burden far older. One of the ranch hands whispered that the wild horse should be kept separate, maybe even sent off somewhere else before it hurt someone. The owner shot him a look that quieted him quickly, but the words hung heavy in the air. People were used to seeing calm ranch horses or tough work horses. They weren't used to something wounded in spirit. The child, though, didn't seem to see danger the same way. There was something in the horse that felt familiar, something that made the child step closer rather than retreat. Slowly, the child's hand brushed the horse's cheek again, and the animal let out a shaky breath. Its eyes softened for a moment, and some of the tension in its body eased. But the crowd around them made it edgy again. The horse flicked its tail, stomped once, and lifted its head sharply. The child instinctively lowered their own head, a gentle sign of respect. The horse noticed, it hesitated. Then it pressed its forehead against the wooden gate, almost leaning into the space where the child stood. That move unsettled everyone. It wasn't aggression, but it was so sudden that even the owner stepped back. The child didn't. Instead, they slowly lifted both hands and placed them against the horse's muzzle. Their fingers were shaking, their breath uneven, but they stayed. The horse's breathing picked up again, but not like before. It wasn't anger this time, it was fear, deep carved fear, the kind that lives inside an animal long after an injury heals. The child recognized it, not because someone had explained it, but because they had seen fear like that before in small animals rescued around the ranch. Animals that needed gentleness before anything else. The ranch owner was torn. He wanted to step in and pull the child away, but he could see something happening that he didn't want to break. There was a connection forming right before his eyes, something unspoken, something rare. Still, he felt the pressure building. The ranch hands were restless, murmuring among themselves, worried about the child's safety. A few shifted positions, ready to jump in. The owner shot them a warning look, but he could feel their impatience rising. The horse shifted again, brushing its nose lightly against the child's sleeve. The child didn't move. They let the horse nudge them gently, then pressed their palm quietly against the animal's warm skin. The crowd started to relax, thinking the danger might finally be easing. But before anyone could breathe a sigh of relief, a loud bang echoed from behind the barn. It wasn't much, just a loose plank falling, but the sound cracked through the air like a whip. The horse jerked backward, head up, eyes wide, muscles locking tight. The child stumbled, gripping the fence to keep from falling. People gasped and jumped aside, ropes held up again. The horse spun once, kicking dirt into the air. The ranch hands rushed in, but the owner raised his arm again. The child shouted out, not in fear but in firm reassurance. The horse paused at the sound, lowering its head just a fraction. The child took that moment and stepped forward again with steady hands raised. The horse quivered, torn between old instincts and the strange calm coming from the child. Slowly, unbearably slowly, it began to settle again. This time, though, the fear didn't fade entirely. It stayed under the surface like a shifting shadow. The child could feel it, the adults could see it. The horse was trying, but something in its past held tight around its spirit. That mystery became a quiet weight in the air. People wondered what had shaped the horse this way. What had scared it enough to make trust so difficult? The child wondered too, though they didn't have words for the question yet. All they knew was that the horse wasn't dangerous by nature. It was hurting. The owner stepped closer and finally spoke, his voice low enough not to spook the horse. He said the animal couldn't stay in the corral like this. They would need to move it to the smaller pen behind the barn, a place quieter and easier to manage. But moving it wouldn't be easy. Everyone knew that. The horse had barely allowed one child to approach it. How would it walk across the ranch yard surrounded by people and noise? But they didn't have much choice. The corral wasn't secure enough. If the horse panicked again, it could break the gate or injure itself. The child looked up at the owner, eyes wide with worry. They didn't want to leave the horse's side. The owner hesitated, then nodded. He told the child they could stay close during the move, but only if they followed his instructions carefully. The child nodded back without hesitation. The ranch hands looked at each other nervously. They weren't sure this was a good idea, but no one wanted to break the fragile connection forming. The owner stepped around slowly, keeping his distance, and guided the child to lead the horse toward the small gate on the far side of the corral. The horse followed in hesitant steps, each one lighter than the last but still unsure. The yard remained quiet, everyone stepping aside to give them space. The child murmured soft words now and then, steadying the horse each time it twitched or flicked its ears nervously. Dust lifted around their feet, the sun casting a warm glow over them as if watching carefully too. When they reached the smaller pen, the horse paused, lifting its head high to scan the area. The pen was narrow, with high wooden boards that offered shelter from noise and wind. It was safer but still unfamiliar. The child walked in first, slowly, hands open, turning to face the horse. The animal hesitated at the entrance, stepping back once, then forward again. Its ears shifted between fear and curiosity. The child held still, letting the horse make its choice. After a long moment, the horse stepped inside. The ranch hands quietly closed the gate behind it. Some sighed in relief, others whispered questions about what would happen next. The owner didn't answer any of them. He watched the horse and the child with an expression that carried both worry and something like hope. He had seen many horses over his lifetime, but none had behaved quite like this one. Something in its story was still hidden, something that explained the fear and the strange pull toward the child. The child pressed their hands gently against the horse's neck. The horse lowered its head slightly, allowing the touch. But its eyes were still troubled, as if it was holding back secrets tied too tightly inside. The ranch owner stepped back to give them space, but he kept watching closely. The tension wasn't resolved. If anything, the mystery deepened. The wild horse trusted no one but the child, and nobody understood why. The bond forming between them was real, but delicate. Any wrong move could break it. As the sun dropped lower, shadows stretched across the yard. The child stayed by the horse, humming softly, unsure if they were helping but unable to walk away. The horse leaned into them lightly, its breath warming their sleeve. Yet deep in its eyes was a warning. Something was still unsettled, something big enough to change everything once it finally came to light. And somewhere in the dimming light, the ranch owner realized this was only the beginning. The horse had come with a mystery, and the child had unknowingly stepped right into the center of it. Whatever the truth was, it hadn't surfaced yet. But its shadow hovered over them, waiting for the moment when it would finally reveal itself. The small pen behind the barn settled into a quiet stillness as the evening deepened. But inside that stillness something restless stirred. The horse kept shifting its weight from one side to the other, its ears twitching at every distant sound. The child stayed close, hands gently brushing the horse's warm coat. They hoped their presence would help settle the animal, but the tension inside the pen felt like a rope pulled tight. Even the ranch owner, standing a few steps away, could sense there was more going on beneath the surface than simple fear. Something hidden was wrapped around the horse's spirit, and the weight of it filled the space between everyone on the ranch. A few of the ranch hands drifted near the barn, watching from a distance. They weren't convinced that keeping the wild horse was a good idea. Some believed it was dangerous, maybe too dangerous. Others thought the child's bond with it might be helpful, but they didn't know how long that would last. Fear can turn quickly, and horses can shift from calm to chaos in a heartbeat. One of the hands crossed his arms and whispered to another that the horse reminded him of the ones captured from far-off valleys, animals that had seen things humans couldn't understand. The child overheard the whispers and felt a small knot tighten inside. They didn't want the horse to be judged before anyone truly understood it. The child moved closer until their forehead almost touched the horse's cheek. The horse breathed deeply, and for a moment the soft exhale felt like a bridge between them. But the peace didn't last long. A sudden gust of wind rattled the boards of the pen, making the horse jerk its head up in alarm. It pressed back against the far wall, hooves scraping the ground. The child felt their heart race, afraid the horse might hurt itself again. The ranch owner stepped forward, hands raised to calm both the horse and the child. He spoke softly, reminding the child to step aside just a little. Not because he doubted them, but because he knew that even the calmest moment could turn unpredictable. The child listened and moved to the side, but their eyes stayed fixed on the horse. They wanted to help. They wanted to understand. Every sign the horse made felt like a message, but the meaning stayed blurry and out of reach. The owner fetched a small lantern from the barn and placed it a few feet away from the pen. Its warm glow spread along the boards, soft enough not to spook the horse but bright enough for them to see clearly. As the light settled, the horse lowered its head. Its breathing steadied a little, though the muscles around its neck stayed tight. The child watched closely. They noticed a faint scar near the horse's shoulder. They hadn't seen it before. It was thin and pale, almost hidden beneath the coat. That small mark sparked a new thought. Maybe the horse wasn't just scared because of the roundup. Maybe something else had happened long before it reached the ranch. The child wanted to ask the owner about the scar, but before they spoke, the horse let out a soft, short cry. It wasn't loud, but it sounded full of something painful. The child stepped forward again, ignoring the owner's warning look, and placed their hand on the horse's neck. The horse didn't pull away. It didn't push back either. It simply stood there, breathing slowly, eyes unfocused like it was seeing something far away. From outside the pen, a hand suddenly pointed toward the horizon. A rider was approaching, the silhouette faint against the fading light. The ranch owner narrowed his eyes, trying to make out who it was. Travelers rarely came this way at night unless they had a reason. The child noticed the tension in the owner's shoulders. Whoever that rider was, their arrival shifted the air in a way the child didn't understand yet. When the rider reached the yard, the horse reacted instantly. Its head jerked up, ears forward, body stiffening as though every muscle remembered something frightening. The ranch owner approached the rider quietly, asking what brought him here so late. The rider introduced himself as someone passing through, but his eyes drifted quickly toward the pen, toward the horse. The horse let out a deep snort, stamping the ground. The child saw fear flash across its eyes again. The rider asked if the horse was newly captured. He asked in a casual tone, but something about the way he studied the horse made the child uneasy. The ranch owner gave a short explanation, careful with his words. The rider nodded slowly, then asked if the horse had been injured before arriving. His gaze stayed fixed on the scar near the shoulder. The child felt the hair on their arms rise. How did the rider notice the scar so quickly? The owner asked if the rider had seen this horse before. The rider hesitated, then claimed no. But the child could see his hands tighten slightly on the reins of his own horse. When the rider finally left, the ranch hands whispered their own suspicions. Some believed the rider was just curious. Others thought he knew something he didn't want to admit. The child felt the weight of those whispers. They thought of the scar. They thought of the fear in the horse's eyes. They thought of how the horse reacted the instant the rider appeared. Something connected them, even if the adults didn't see it clearly. As night settled deeper, the ranch owner told everyone to get some rest. He assigned one of the ranch hands to keep watch near the barn just to be safe. The child didn't want to leave the horse alone, but the owner insisted. The child reluctantly agreed, giving the horse one final gentle touch before heading inside. But rest didn't come easily. The child lay awake, replaying the entire day in their mind. They thought of the moment the horse pressed its forehead against the gate, the sound that startled it, the way it reacted to the rider, and the scar that now seemed to carry a story no one understood. The horse wasn't just wild. It was hurting in a way that connected deeply with something hidden in its past. And the child sensed that whatever the truth was, it hadn't surfaced yet. Later that night, the ranch hand keeping watch reported hearing distant hoofbeats. Not on the ranch grounds, but near the outer fields. The sound came and went like someone passing through slowly. The ranch owner stepped outside to listen, but the night had become too quiet again. Still, that brief sound was enough to raise questions. The owner wondered if the rider had truly left or if he was circling back. He didn't share the thought aloud, not wanting to spark fear among the workers. Morning arrived with a golden light spreading across the ranch. Birds filled the air with steady calls. The child hurried outside before breakfast and ran straight to the pen. The horse was awake, eyes alert but softer than before. The child approached slowly and the horse leaned its head forward in greeting. The child smiled, placing their hands gently on the horse's muzzle. But that small moment of calm didn't erase the heaviness lingering beneath the surface. The ranch owner joined them and crouched near the pen, studying the horse's posture. He noticed how the horse reacted only to certain sounds now, the way its ears tuned to anything faint or distant. He knew this behavior meant something, though he hadn't pieced it together yet. When he mentioned the idea of sending word to nearby farms to find out if anyone had lost a horse that matched the description, the child's stomach tightened. They didn't want the horse to be taken away. They wanted to help it heal here. Before the owner could send any messages, 2 men from a neighboring town arrived. They came to borrow tools, or so they said, but their eyes kept drifting toward the small pen. They exchanged glances when they saw the scar on the horse. One of them whispered something the ranch owner didn't catch. The child saw it, though. They saw the way the men studied the horse like they were trying to remember something, and the horse felt it too. It stepped back, breathing heavy again. The ranch owner grew suspicious and politely sent the men on their way, but the worry stayed with him. The child sensed it and asked quietly if something was wrong. The owner didn't answer directly. He only said that the horse wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was drawing attention. The child didn't know what that meant yet, but they felt the tension rising. That afternoon, while feeding the horse, the child noticed something else unusual. A small mark beneath the scar, faint but shaped almost like the tip of a brand that never fully set. The child's heart raced. They knew what a brand meant. It meant the horse belonged to someone before. It meant the horse had a history far deeper than anyone guessed. The child told the ranch owner, and he examined the mark closely. His expression darkened. Brands were not usually hidden. This one looked faded and incomplete, as if someone tried to remove it or cover it. And if someone tried to remove a brand, it usually meant trouble. The ranch owner stood up slowly, dusting off his hands, and looked out toward the wide open fields. The horse watched him with wary eyes. The child felt something shift inside them. The pen, the rider, the scar, the whispers from strangers, the faint brand, all of it connected into a larger conflict that was only beginning to unfold. The ranch owner finally said it out loud. Someone, somewhere, wanted this horse back, and they might not care how they got it. Those quiet words settled like a storm cloud over the ranch, hinting that the mystery surrounding the horse wasn't just about fear anymore, it was about danger. Real danger creeping closer with every passing hour. The morning sun had barely climbed over the hills when the child hurried out toward the pen again. They hadn't slept much, and their mind kept turning the same questions again and again. Who did the horse belong to? Why did someone try to hide the brand? Why did strangers keep showing up at the ranch, pretending to look for tools or directions, but always staring at the same scar on the horse's shoulder? Every sign pointed to a story much bigger than anyone had expected, and the child felt caught in the middle of it without knowing how to protect the animal now depending on them. When they reached the pen, the horse lifted its head as though it had been waiting. The child slipped through the gate and moved slowly toward it, feeling that same connection they felt every day. The horse pressed its warm muzzle into the child's hands, letting out a quiet breath. It wasn't trembling today, but its eyes held a weary caution. The child sensed the horse was growing tired of being on alert all the time. Even animals could feel when trouble kept circling close. The ranch owner approached after a while, carrying a small notebook. He explained that he spent most of the night trying to piece together anything he knew about nearby ranches, missing horses, or troublemakers wandering through the region. He couldn't find anything solid, but there were rumors passing across towns of a group involved in illegal horse trading. Some of those animals were mistreated or pushed too hard, and people whispered that the group tried to hide their tracks by altering brands. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to make the owner uneasy. The child listened quietly, feeling a tightness in the chest that wouldn't go away. They didn't want to imagine the horse in the hands of people who treated animals as nothing more than property. They looked at the horse, at the way it leaned slightly into their touch, and they felt a stronger urge to protect it than ever, but they were still just a child. They didn't know how to fight something they didn't fully understand. Later that day, the ranch hands gathered near the barn for their usual chores, but conversations drifted to the same topic again. One of them mentioned seeing dust trails far out near the valley, as if riders had passed through early that morning. Another said he found fresh hoofprints near the north fence, ones that didn't match any horses on the ranch. The owner didn't want to jump to conclusions, but he couldn't ignore it either. Someone was coming closer. The child stayed near the pen the whole time, barely moving from their spot. They watched the horizon, eyes scanning each patch of land for signs of movement. The horse stayed close to them, occasionally nudging their shoulder as if acknowledging the tension hanging over the ranch. There was a moment when everything felt too quiet, like the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. During lunch, the ranch owner told the child that they needed to consider moving the horse to a safer spot, at least temporarily. Maybe deeper inside the barn or in a different part of the ranch where it wouldn't be visible from the road. The child understood the reasoning, but something inside resisted. The horse hated enclosed spaces. The first night it arrived, it panicked inside the barn. They worried moving it again would make things worse. Still, the owner insisted it was dangerous to leave it exposed any longer. With gentle steps and calm voices, they guided the horse toward a larger barn stall that had been cleared out. The child walked beside it the whole time, murmuring steady reassurance. The horse didn't fight as fiercely as before, but its ears twitched nonstop. When they finally reached the stall, the horse hesitated at the entrance. The child stepped inside first, hoping the horse would follow. After a long moment, it did, though its breathing grew heavier. The child felt each tense inhale like a warning. As evening approached, the ranch seemed quieter than usual. The hands worked faster than normal, wanting everything secured before nightfall. The owner posted 2 workers outside near the barn and told them to keep watch in shifts. The child wasn't told to stay inside, but they could sense the owner didn't want them wandering too far either. Just as the sun dipped, a strange sound broke the stillness. It wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that spread across the ranch. A distant call from a horse followed by the faint echo of hooves. Everyone froze for a moment, listening. The child's heart thumped hard enough to feel in their hands. The owner stepped outside the barn, scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes. He couldn't see anything yet, but he didn't relax. Minutes passed, then one of the ranch hands shouted from the outer fence. He saw something moving near the creek, shadows of riders. The child rushed to the barn stall, heart pounding, and found the horse pacing nervously. It sensed something long before anyone else did. The child placed their hands against the horse's neck, whispering softly. The horse settled slightly, though its eyes stayed fixed on the stall door. The ranch owner returned quickly and told the child to stay put. He didn't want to startle the horse more, and he didn't want the child near any possible danger. But the child refused to leave. They said the horse calmed only when they were close. The owner hesitated, struggling between responsibility and the undeniable truth, then nodded reluctantly. The horse's ears were pointed toward the barn entrance. It let out a quiet snort, and the child felt its muscles tighten again. Something or someone was approaching. The ranch hand spread out, forming a loose line near the barnyard, ready to step in if needed. The owner positioned himself near the entrance, hand resting on the side of the door frame, jaw clenched. Then came the footsteps. Slow at first, then more purposeful. A figure appeared in the doorway, backlit by the fading light. The rider who had visited earlier stepped inside. His expression was calm, too calm, and his eyes went straight to the stall. The horse let out a sharp breath, shifting back. The owner asked the rider what he wanted. The rider claimed he was just passing through again and wanted to check on the horse, but his gaze lingered too long on the hidden brand. The child felt their pulse surge. The horse pressed its head against the child's shoulder, a silent plea for protection. The owner stepped forward, blocking the rider's view. His voice stayed steady, but the tension in the air was almost suffocating. He told the rider that the horse was not for sale and not open for questions. The rider didn't argue. He only smiled, a slow smile that didn't reach his eyes, and stepped back toward the doorway. Before he left, he said something that made the child shiver. He said that horses with incomplete brands often lead to unfinished business. As soon as he disappeared from sight, the owner shut the barn doors and ordered the ranch hands to remain alert. The child knew the riders near the creek weren't a coincidence. The strange men passing through weren't a coincidence. Someone wanted this horse, and they were willing to keep circling until they got it. Night settled thick and heavy across the ranch. The wind picked up, brushing against the barn and rattling the wooden boards. Inside, the child sat beside the horse, leaning against its warm body. The horse kept shifting its weight, unable to rest. Every sound outside made it tense. The child tried their best to soothe it, stroking its mane and speaking in a soft voice. Hours passed like that until a noise outside snapped the child awake. Something scraped against the barn wall. Then another sound, soft footsteps, not from the ranch hands. These footsteps were careful, creeping along the outer wall. The horse raised its head sharply, muscles coiled. The child felt their heartbeat tumble into fear. A shadow moved under the barn door, then another. The child grabbed a small lantern and held it close, trying to steady their hands. Outside, muffled voices whispered back and forth. The child couldn't make out the words, but they knew what was happening. Someone was trying to get inside? The horse stomped once, snorting fiercely. The child held on to its halter, whispering desperately for it to stay calm. The footsteps grew louder now, circling the barn until they stopped near the door. A heavy silence followed, the kind that warned something was about to happen. The ranch felt miles away, even though the owner and workers were most likely still nearby. The child kept their eyes fixed on the stall entrance. The horse raised its head high, ears pinned forward. Outside, a hand gripped the barn door. The wood creaked under the pressure as someone tried to force it open. The child's breath caught in their throat, the moment stretched thin, ready to snap. Danger pressed closer with every passing second, and the child knew whatever happened next would decide everything. The barn door shuddered again, and for a moment the child felt as if the world had shrunk to the size of that stall. The horse pressed close, its breath shaky and warm against the child's shoulder. The lantern flickered, sending shadows crawling across the walls. Just when it seemed the door would give way, a sharp shout echoed across the yard. It wasn't a whisper or a warning. It was the ranch owner's voice, loud and commanding enough to make the air itself pulse. The intruder froze. The child heard hurried footsteps outside, then the heavy stomping of the ranch owner running toward the barn. A second later, the door swung open, not from the intruder pushing in, but from the owner forcing his way inside. Two ranch hands followed behind him, both holding long poles they used for the cattle. They spread out fast, blocking the entrance. The man who had been trying to break in took one step back, then another, eyes darting as though searching for an escape route. But more footsteps sounded behind him. Two workers who had been on patrol appeared from the darkness, cutting off his retreat. The child exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. The horse lowered its head slightly, though its muscles stayed tight. The ranch owner didn't shout this time. His voice came out low and steady as he demanded answers. The man hesitated, then blurted out that he was only trying to reclaim something that didn't belong to the ranch. He claimed the horse was part of his group's stock, that they had trained it and raised it. But his story didn't line up. The child could hear the lies twisting and breaking apart before the sentences even finished. The owner could too. One of the ranch hands noticed a small metal tool in the intruder's coat pocket. When it was pulled out, everyone recognized it for what it was, a brand-altering tool. The kind used to reshape or hide markings for illegal horse trading. The man's face drained of confidence as the truth finally came out. He wasn't there to reclaim anything. He was there to take the horse and erase any sign it had ever belonged to someone else. The owner told the child to stay inside the stall while the men escorted the intruder away. The child held onto the horse's neck, feeling their own heartbeats slowly returning to normal. Outside, the voices faded into the distance until there was only the quiet rustle of the night breeze against the barn walls. A few minutes later, the owner came back, this time without any rush or fear in his step. He leaned on the stall door and let out a long breath. He admitted he suspected someone dangerous might eventually show up, but he hadn't expected it to happen so suddenly. He crouched beside the child, looking at the horse. For the first time in a long while, his face softened with something other than worry. He explained that the man would not be returning. The authorities had already been alerted earlier that week just in case, and now they would take over the investigation. The illegal group had been causing trouble across several counties, and this horse might be the key piece of evidence needed to shut down their activities completely. The child felt a wave of relief wash over them, though not all the tension left their body. The danger had passed, but the memory of it lingered like a faint echo. The horse stepped closer to the owner and gently nudged his arm. It no longer seemed afraid. It looked almost trusting. The owner smiled, resting a hand on its neck. He said that whatever the horse had been through before, it no longer had to face anything alone. The ranch had taken it in, and now the ranch was responsible for keeping it safe. Over the next few days, life slowly returned to its usual rhythm, though not without changes. The horse no longer stayed shut inside the stall. Instead, the owner allowed it back into the open pen where it felt most comfortable. The child spent nearly every free moment there. They brushed its coat, fed it, and walked with it around the ranch yard. The animal's energy improved day by day until its steps carried a confidence no one had seen in it before. News traveled quickly through nearby towns about the attempted break-in. Folks started hearing about the horse with the mysterious brand, the one that had escaped a dangerous group and ended up under the protection of a small ranch. People came by to offer help. Some brought feed, others offered blankets or medical supplies. The ranch felt warmer than it had in a long time, filled with neighbors who wanted to be part of something good. One morning, a local sheriff stopped by to give an update. The man who had tried to break in had provided information once he realized the law was already closing in on the group. The sheriff said their investigation was progressing faster than expected thanks to what they found on him, including a list of horses the group had targeted. The albino horse wasn't originally on the list, which meant it must have escaped or been taken before anyone could claim it officially. That explained the panic the group showed in trying to find it again. The child listened to every word, feeling the last pieces of the puzzle slide into place. The horse had never been meant for a good life in the hands of those men. It had run when it had the chance, leaving everything behind in search of safety. Somehow, despite all the odds, it had wandered to the ranch. It had found people who cared. After the sheriff left, the ranch owner asked the child to follow him to the pasture. The horse walked beside them, curious and calm. The owner stopped near the fence and looked out over the open land. Then he told the child something unexpected. He said that he had been thinking about the future, about what the horse meant to the ranch now. He explained that caring for an animal like this wasn't just a matter of safety. It was also about trust. And the horse had made it clear who it trusted most. He turned to the child and said he wanted them to take full responsibility for the horse's training and care. He believed the horse had chosen them. The child stood still for a moment, feeling something warm and bright bloom inside their chest. They agreed, their voice barely steady, but filled with gratitude. From that day on, the horse became part of the ranch family in a deeper way. The child trained it with patience, teaching it simple commands at first, then more challenging ones. The horse responded beautifully, its spirit no longer weighed down by fear. People who visited the ranch often stopped to watch the two moving together across the field. They said the pair looked inseparable, as if they communicated in a language invisible to everyone else. Months passed, bringing new seasons and new routines. The ranch grew busier with work, but the child and the horse always found time for each other. The horse's coat grew healthier, its muscles stronger, and its steps smoother. It was no longer the abandoned foal that was fading away. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the kindness that had saved its life. One warm afternoon, the child brought the horse to the far hill overlooking the ranch. They stood there in the quiet breeze, taking in the land that had become home to both of them. The child rested a hand on the horse's neck, feeling its steady breath. The horse leaned gently against them, a gesture that needed no explanation. The ranch owner walked up the hill a moment later, joining them in silence. He watched the two standing together, then said softly that sometimes the world sends us something fragile not to test us, but to remind us what compassion can do. He said the horse had changed the ranch in ways he never expected. It had brought people closer, reminded everyone of their responsibility to protect the helpless, and proved that even the most broken beginnings could lead to strong endings. The child nodded, unable to fully express the warmth filling their heart. They looked at the horse and whispered that no matter what had happened before, it would never be abandoned again. The horse flicked its ears as if it understood every word. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the fields, the three of them walked back toward the ranch yard. The horse pranced lightly beside the child, full of life and trust. And for the first time since it arrived, the ranch felt completely at peace. The journey that started with fear and uncertainty had turned into something beautiful. A young foal once left to fade away was now living a new chapter, surrounded by safety and love. And the child who had held a trembling animal in the dark of night had grown braver, finding strength in the simple act of kindness. In the end, that was the story everyone remembered. Not the danger, not the fear, but the bond between a child and a horse that overcame everything, inspiring anyone who heard it.